Well, hey, Vibrant, welcome to the Next Level Coffeecast, episode 4, coming to you from the Meekonomics series. My name is Zach Garrett. I am the growth pastor here at Vibrant, and here with me today is our special guest, Annie Knorr.
Hi.
Hi, Annie.
Happy to be here.
Well, we're really glad to have you with us. Now, Annie is someone who you've probably seen, around if you attend here at Vibrant at the Lamb's Gap campus, but you may not be aware of what she does here on staff. She's actually a part-time staff member here with us. And so I'm really, really excited to have her in a conversation with us. And we're going to have coffee. We're going to talk about what she's been doing for her coffee in this season of her life, something different, something that maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with, but can relate to, I would say, in a certain way. And of course, we'll dive into Christ-centered conversation over coffee, talking about this past Sunday's message. So grab some coffee if that's your kind of thing. Would love for you to take us along for a walk or a car drive. Strap in. This is going to be a great episode. Let's go. So, all right, let's get our coffee going. This is a really simple way of brewing coffee. This is a
French press.
French press, and I've already put the plunger down, so I can't bring it back up. But you put a hot water in here. You put a measured amount of coffee grounds. Wait, Annie, do you have a French press?
I do.
Do you and Jesse use it often?
Well, Jesse doesn't drink coffee. I occasionally drink coffee, but I use it from time to time. I'm finding out there's a lot of science that goes into French press as far as brewing time and temperatures and grind of.
Right.
So I'm in the learning process, but it seems like a simple way to brew coffee.
It is.
From the outside.
Yeah.
Once you kind of figure out
but
what
then you get into all the different water temperatures and how coarse your grind is. And so anyway, I went and picked up coffee today from Capital Joe's. It's in downtown Mechanicsburg. Now, they don't roast the coffee themselves, but they sell coffee called Square One Coffee. And I believe this is roasted. Is it down in New York? Somebody know?
Beats me.
Somewhere in this neck of the woods, it's locally roasted, but is locally purchased, like I said, down at Capital Joe's.
It was roasted today.
Was it roasted today?
Oh, no, sorry. It was roasted like 6 days ago.
Oh, okay. So
Sorry.
still, okay. That brings up a good point that when you're roasting coffee, which I can roast at home. I do every now and then. They say that from the time you roast, you have about 2 weeks until you lose most of your flavor profile from the bean. So when I got these beans and then they ground it and then I put it in the water, it was still had this magical, what you call like a bloom. And so this is really fresh. Put it in the hot water. There's the science about how coarse of a ground and all that stuff. Put in the French press, set time for 4 minutes. Push down the plunger to get the grounds to the bottom so that we have good, clean coffee up top. And I'm ready to drink some coffee if you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's try it.
There you go.
Thank you, sir.
You're so welcome.
And you just drink yours black?
Yeah.
You don't add anything to it?
No, not at all.
And
especially in the French press, I feel like you can get a lot of the flavor profiles because the beans, the grounds are just kind of submerged and they're swimming in the water versus the water going through it quickly. So,
gotcha. Well, do you mind if I add?
Yeah. And so why don't you talk about what you've been doing with your coffee lately for some health reasons?
Yeah, for sure. I think over the last 6 months to a year or so, I've just been reacting to a lot of other foods that I didn't really used to react to before. So I've had to switch to a lot of non-dairy alternatives and things like that. I can't drink my coffee black. I'm not have that strong of willpower.
To each their own.
So I typically will only drink coffee if it's maybe 50% coffee, 50% sugar and creamers and things like that. So I've been trying to switch to non-dairy and more natural types of additives to put in here. So I have a little bit of almond milk that I can add in here, which this is a brand new bottle. So, there is no seal to it. It did have a little crack. So you see how much I'm adding? Like it's a considerable. I know.
Yeah, latte.
Yeah. But then I also have some pure maple syrup, which is actually a really good natural sweetener. And because it is natural, comes, pretty much straight from the tree, it has a lot of antioxidants in it and other nutrients and things. I've been trying to use that more so than some other of the artificial sweeteners and things like that. So
And you told me that what you're doing is you're kind of just eliminating a lot of the things that can be cause our bodies to react
Hmm.
adversely, and then kind of giving your body what you said, like a 4 week.
Yeah, like a considerable adjustment period, typically about a month, maybe even a little bit longer, and then slowly adding those things back in just to see what it really is that I should be avoiding and everything else. So it's definitely been an adjustment because
Yeah.
love me some sugar. So
Yeah. Well, and there are a lot of people who don't do well with lactose. I have a niece who is deathly allergic to the protein that's in dairy. So oat milk and what would you say almond milk
almond
and stuff like
milk,
that. It's such a blessing
coconut
for people
milk, soy milk.
to be
Yeah.
able to use. All right. So Annie, you say that you are a behind the scenes person, typically. Which so I'm excited that you're get to sit here and talk then with me about meekness. Because for some people to maintain behind the scenes and not get in the spotlight is a great sign of meekness. But I think before we even get into that, I'd love for you to just talk about what you do here on staff for the people who don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my official title is the Family Ministry Administrator. So, that involves a lot of typical administrative work, database management and filing and communication. But a really big chunk of what I get to do is just get Jerry and Jeff's incredible visions that they have for kids ministry and student ministry and just help that kind of come to life, be an extra set of hands for them, whether that's planning youth group events or helping to prep some of the supplies for the curriculum that our kids work through on Sunday mornings. So it's a pretty fun job. I'm pretty blessed. Yeah.
Yeah. And when they're gone or whatever, we've also seen you step in leadership roles in their ministry, such as on Sunday nights with vibrant students. While Jeff was gone for 2 weeks on vacation, you stepped in and led that and did a great job. So Vibrant is very blessed to have you. And we have several other part-time staff people that is just so great to have this well-rounded staff environment. And I know it's just talking with Jeff and talking with Jerry, there are things that we can do, but having her do those things, it frees us up to do other things that really only that we can do, and just makes our children and students ministry that much more productive and a blessing to our families.
Oh,
So
thanks.
thank you. So on Sunday, Drew asked a really good question that I think a lot of us tend to look over because it's one thing that we don't really want to talk about. So hey, why not talk about it on here? But that is to look at your life and go, where are my weak points? And he asked specifically, when was the last time that you actually felt weak, that you realized that you have this weakness in your life?
Every day.
Really?
All the time. Oh yeah. I am no stranger to my weaknesses for sure. And I think that's just not I've never had a problem kind of pinpointing those.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And do you feel like that's something then that you try and circumnavigate? You try and avoid those areas in your life, or do you look at it as, and we'll get to the scripture here in just a little bit in 2 Corinthians, what Paul says about weaknesses, or do you see this as an opportunity for, I guess, as Drew kind of gave the illustration, for you to say, you know what, I can't really do this well on my own, but this is an opportunity for God to really shine through me?
I would say that's probably where I'm at now. Or at least that's my more natural tendency now, is to kind of open that up for God to kind of fill the gaps there. But definitely for a long time, and still kind of sometimes struggle with that, is wanting to be able to do it all myself and wanting to be able to, as a perfectionist and a people pleaser, there's definitely a lot of things in there that I want things done my way, but I also want them done in a way that other people approve of. And I've been working on learning to just seek God's approval over anything else. So
Yeah. That's something I can relate to. Is there's a phrase that's kind of been, I don't know, kind of the catchphrase for my life recently, and that is performance for acceptance, where I want to do these things, not even really for my own good or because I believe that it's pleasing to God, but for other people to be happy with me, so that I feel their acceptance, so that makes me feel worth and secure in the environment that I am. And yeah, that's a weakness that I can definitely identify with. I think one that's very prevalent in my life that comes up I'll say, yeah, okay, probably more often than I care to admit, is losing patience.
Hmm.
And wow, do kids, a 2 and a 4-year-old, uh, and hey, even in some ways an 11-year-old, cause you to lose patience. And that is an area where there's been times when I've just walked away and I've gone, oh my gosh, I really just blew it as a dad. And just praying, God, I really need for you to help me in those moments to be the kind of godly father that my kids need for me to be. And so I think it's hard for me still to imagine, okay, what does it look like exactly for God to if you followed what Drew gave this metaphor on Sunday, that his son Ronan, who has special needs, is in this baseball league,
Buddy ball.
right? Buddy ball,
Yeah.
yeah. And Drew helps him go up there to bat because Ronan will take the bat up there to the tee and he'll kind of like poke the ball. But Drew now will go up there and he'll take Ronan, take his hands with his hands and grab the bat and they'll swing the bat
Yeah.
together. And he said, we just crushed that ball. And in the same way, what are the weaknesses in our lives, such as maybe performance for acceptance, or when you're a parent and you lose patience and you seem to be quick to anger? How and that's a question I think we all need to think about is, how can I visualize, how can I see God coming in and taking my hands and taking that bat, and we do something far greater in that moment than what I'm managed to achieve on my own?
Yeah. Well, I as someone who's not a parent yet, I can't speak to the parenting portion
Sure.
of that. But as far as performance for acceptance, I think it can be so challenging because, and I think Jamie had brought this up when she was on here with you, is hustle culture and a lot of things that we do in an attempt to win other people's approval is so highly affirmed in our culture. So things that we do, like filling our schedules to the brim because we're trying to do all the things for all the people, or independence and being able to do things by yourself is highly affirmed. And people say, oh, wow, look at you. And for people maybe like us, and I don't know, I can't speak for you, but who want that affirmation, it's hard to pivot from what culture is affirming us for and what God is affirming us for. And so I think just being able to shift that and aiming to please God above anybody else is really, I think, what matters. And just kind of having that shift and change of mind would kind of maybe help let go of some of those things.
Yeah, and I think it comes also from just that a daily renewal of the mind of who God says you are, his promises, his faithfulness. I think it comes from consistently, well, I know for me, it comes from consistently being in his word and being reminded that I am unconditionally loved by God. I've been accepted by him. My worth was that he was willing to die for me in my sins, and my security is eternal.
Yeah.
And when I can live confidently in that, it keeps me from having to be weak or susceptible to how other people feel about me. Okay, there are definitely some situations where it's good to have people's approval, right? Such as, my boss or my spouse or things like that. But ultimately, not letting that define my life, because when we let other people steer the car, we're serving a different master than God.
Yeah.
And that is weakness. And I think there's a level, okay, and let's go, there's a level of pride to be removed there too, of some people really feel prideful, and they need that pat on the back, and they need to be told, good job, and you're so good at that, and look how good you are, and going, yep, I don't need that anymore, because who God says I am is enough. And so I'm not even going to live anymore to gain that and to boast my ego and to stroke my pride, but even laying that down in order to follow Jesus more.
Well, it definitely takes off a lot of pressure too, with this pressure of trying to please everybody. If now your one goal is just to please one person, you're just aiming to please God, and it takes off the pressure of, we don't have to win that approval. We already have his love and his grace and all of those things. And so it definitely helps to alleviate that pressure of needing things to be perfect or wanting things to be perfect, and being able to accept our weaknesses and not be ashamed of those weaknesses.
Yeah.
And just knowing that we're able to find strength and find hope and continue the direction we're supposed to go because Jesus helps to fill those gaps.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we have this mistaken thought that in me just focusing on God, that it's going to cause failure in my relationships and in my work. And if I'm just aiming to please God, but what about your wife and your children? And I have really lived by if I put God first, then I will be the best husband I can possibly be.
Absolutely.
If I put God first to be the best father, I can be the best pastor that I can possibly be. Keeping my eyes solely as much as I can fixed on Jesus doesn't mean that I am allowing my other relationships to deteriorate, but in fact, I'll be even more of a blessing because of Christ in me.
Yeah.
Right? In my weakness, His strength is made perfect, which leads me to I really and one of the things that I love about this opportunity to do Next Level is, in the time that you have in the pulpit, you can't get to every scripture or every thought in that time, and so it gives me the opportunity every now and then to pull out something that just continues to go next level or deeper with what Drew was teaching on. And Paul writes about his weakness very explicitly here in 2 Corinthians 12. And he's talking about a thorn that God has put in his flesh in order that he would not boast of himself. Because Paul's greatest demon was pride. He was very prideful whenever he was Saul of Tarsus, whenever he was persecuting Christians. And he said, I was the Pharisee of Pharisees. If there was anybody that you would said who was perfect in the law, it was me. I think Paul really struggled with that pride. And so here he said, what I'm going to boast in is not in my strengths, but in my weaknesses. And so I just want to read a little bit this, and then we can certainly, I'd love for us to talk through this some. And I'm going to read some portions here, but here in verse 6 says this, but I refrain, and what he's saying is boasting of himself, so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. He's talking about this thorn in his flesh, he says. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.
So good.
And here's what I get from what Paul kind of listed here at the end, was he wasn't just talking about his own shortcomings, but when other people's actions against us make us feel weak. He said his persecutions, the insults. When Paul was in prison a number of times. A number of times he was flogged, he was stoned. Say stoned. I feel like in today's culture, you got to clarify what that means.
It's fair.
Yeah, right. But these things that people did to him, that in his body he was weak, or maybe mentally, spiritually at times he felt weakened because of other people's actions against him. But he knew that in those moments, God said Paul can step out of the way and Christ can come in and his power can be perfect in the midst of his weakness.
What I'm going to say doesn't necessarily apply to other people making you feel weak, but I heard something on the radio recently about, a lot of us are familiar with the story of Jesus healing the paralytic, right? That was paralyzed, laying on a mat, couldn't walk. And Jesus, when he heals him, tells him to take your mat and go. And so it was just a short, like, radio sermon type thing. And they were using that to illustrate that Jesus tells us to take our mat or whatever our testimony is with us, not to leave those hardships behind, but to bring that and share that and show people what God has done. And so I think maybe some of what Paul is saying is giving the glory to God and boasting in what he's done in our lives, rather than trying to make it seem that we've been able to overcome these things ourselves or that we are perfect people. And so I think when it comes to talking about weaknesses or hardships, persecutions, maybe even, is to not, maybe once you've moved through that and walked through that valley, not to just leave it behind, but to really bring a memento of that with you and use that to just boast of God's goodness and what he's done for you. So
yeah, because in that weakness, that's the time. I mean, that's the time that we most clearly see often God's power in our lives, because we're not trying to accomplish something for ourselves. And I talked about this, and I think it was also whenever I sat down with Jamie, of, it's not all that terribly difficult to surrender to God whenever you have nothing left.
yeah,
Right. It's like, and I know there's been a point in my life where I'm like, I really got nothing left but to just give you everything, which isn't a whole lot, it seems like. But it's especially difficult to surrender to God when you feel like that might mean that you're giving up a lot.
yeah,
And so when life has put you in a place of weakness, that oftentimes is the easiest place of surrender, where then Jesus has the greatest opportunity to do work in your life. And this past Sunday, we sang a song again that's kind of fairly new for Vibrant, called "Make Room." And
I love that song.
I will make room for you to do whatever you want to. And what we don't often think about, that Paul is affirming, is that God may be allowing weaknesses to exist in our life so that we can see his work and his power at work in our lives. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think, a lot of people talk about how it's easy to, and like you were saying, when you have nothing left to give, it's easy to surrender, or it's easy to, focus on God when things are really hard and you need help. But when things are maybe going well and you're in a season of growth and plenty, like, it's sometimes harder to remember to devote the same attention and ask the same of God. And so I think, yeah, it's definitely important to make sure to focus on him throughout all the seasons. But weaknesses is one of the easiest ways to be able to see what he's doing, because it's such an easy, not easy, but tangible way to see that progress.
And to see, or even hunger for the need of God's power. And I can think of somebody who I know very personally, who, is living what you'd call the American dream, has a great job, beautiful family, nice house, cars, and all this stuff. But there just seems to be no room to let God do whatever he wants to.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, as bad as this may sound at first, but there's been the prayer in my heart of, God, even if you have to take all of that away in order for this person to see that you are truly what this person needs, do that.
Yeah.
Because it's much better to know Christ and to be in his salvation than to have everything you think you want in this world. But that brokenness often comes with weakness.
Right.
And so it may be that God allows for there to be a weakness to grow in that person's life, even in our lives, Annie, so that because the Spirit wars against the flesh, so that war, that battle may continue, to where our heart cries out in the midst of our weakness, God, I just need for you to move. I need to see your power in my life, because there's just a big hole. There's a big gap here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like this person you're speaking of, I think if we have everything we need materialistically, or we forget to ask for things, or we forget what it feels like to be hungry or to be missing or lacking of something. And so ultimately we need to depend on God, even if we do have everything we need materialistically. But I think being able to identify our weaknesses and really just invite the Spirit in to work in that and change us and help us grow is ultimately what's going to lead to a full life.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't necessarily mean a full garage or a full house,
Right.
but really just living life to the full and being able to follow how God intended us to live.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's wrap up on this question then, because I think most people, it's the natural tendency to want to despise our weaknesses, or to, as like I said, circumnavigate, to walk around them so that people don't know them, so that we don't even have to address them, because it hurts the pride. But in what we've been talking about and what Paul, I think, affirms here in 2 Corinthians 12 is we can actually boast, as crazy as it sounds, about our weaknesses. Not that I'm going to go around and intentionally be weak in areas and use that as a crutch or something to necessarily brag about. Like, guys, you see how terrible I throw a baseball? Woo, isn't that awesome? You know, I think you'd have to take time to understand what Paul meant about the word boast. But it's to be, I think this changes our relationship with God in the way that I'm okay with my weaknesses because I'm excited to see how in the midst of where I'm weak, God will be strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And our weaknesses can help empower other people to do the same by, no perfect people are allowed at Vibrant, because none of us are perfect. So by boasting in our weakness the way that Paul tells us to, it allows us to encourage other people and show them that we all fall short and we all make mistakes, but ultimately it's God who gets the glory for being able to restore us and strengthen us and just fully embrace us with all that love and grace that he has.
So when that paralytic took his mat and went, he had a testimony.
Yeah.
But it was a testimony of, at one point, I was laying in this mat. I was about as weak as you could imagine a person to be. But there's this guy, Jesus, who healed me.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see that story again when Jesus heals the lepers and they go back and they tell. And with the woman at the well, he didn't heal her, but I think she was definitely in a moment or in a season where she was very weak because she had been with a number of other men. She was probably really this outcast, looked down upon woman. And Jesus actually comes up and speaks to her and identifies himself as the Savior. And yeah, it's this testimony that then allows us to go and relate to other people because we all share weaknesses.
Yeah.
We all have shortcomings in our lives. And to say, you know what, but Jesus did something amazing here.
Right. Our weaknesses should be a way to give the glory to God rather than diminishing anything of ourselves.
Yeah. Well, hey, Vibrant, thank you for sitting in with us. We hope that this was a blessing to you. I know that I thoroughly enjoyed having coffee with Annie. Thank you for being a guest with me today
Thanks for having me.
The Coffeecast. And we hope to see you next week. As each week through this Meekonomics series, we drop a new episode on Thursday. So after this, we have 2 more episodes before we wrap up the Coffeecast for the Meekonomics series. I'm Zach. This is Annie. Hope you have a blessed week. Talk to you later.